"Will you be my husband?" my Apache neighbor asked on our second meeting, a question that shocked me. Daniel had not planned to stay long in the small desert town. At first, it was meant to be a pause, not a destination. He had come there after a series of quiet failures that never made headlines but slowly drained his confidence. A job that ended without warning. A relationship that faded without a clear reason. Friends who stayed behind while life moved on without him. The town was far from everything he knew, surrounded by wide land, dusty roads, and long silences that felt heavy at night. He rented a small, old house on the edge of the neighborhood. The house was simple, almost forgotten, with faded paint and a narrow porch that creaked when he stepped on it. Daniel liked that no one asked questions. People nodded when they passed him, sometimes said hello, but never pushed for more. That was exactly what he wanted. He spent his days doing remote work on his laptop and his evenings fixing small things around the house, pretending he enjoyed the quiet more than he actually did. On his third day there, Daniel noticed movement next door. The neighboring house had been empty when he arrived, but now a dusty pickup truck was parked outside. Boxes were stacked near the door. A woman stood on the porch, speaking to an elderly lady who sat on a chair, wrapped in a light blanket despite the warm air. Daniel told himself not to stare, but something about the scene pulled his attention. It felt personal, like he was watching a family moment that did not belong to him. Later that afternoon, as Daniel took out his trash, the woman noticed him. She paused, looked over, and gave a small, polite smile. Daniel hesitated, then returned it. He was not good at first conversations anymore. Still, it felt rude not to say anything. "Hi," he said, lifting his hand slightly. "Hello," she replied. Her voice was calm, steady. "You must be the new neighbor." "I guess I am," Daniel said. "Moved in a few days ago." She nodded. "I'm Alina, I just came back today." They stood there for a moment, unsure what else to say. Daniel noticed her posture. She stood straight, not stiff, but confident in a quiet way. There was nothing dramatic about her appearance, yet she had a presence that made the space feel fuller. "My grandmother lives with me," Alina added, glancing back at the porch. "She gets tired easily." "That's understandable," Daniel said. "If you need help with anything, boxes or tools, just let me know." Alina studied him for a second as if deciding something. Then she smiled again, this time warmer. "Thank you, that's kind." That was their first meeting. Short, polite, easy to forget. Daniel expected that would be the end of it. But that evening, as he sat inside his quiet house, he realized he kept thinking about the conversation. Not because it was special, but because it felt grounded, real. Something he had not felt in a long time. Over the next few days, Daniel settled into a routine. Mornings were for work. Afternoons were for walks around the area, learning the shape of the land. The town was small, but it carried history in its buildings and people. Some places looked worn, others carefully preserved. There were signs written in both English and Apache. Daniel did not fully understand the culture, but he respected the fact that it was deeply rooted there. Sometimes he saw Alina outside, hanging clothes, carrying groceries, or sitting with her grandmother in the shade. They exchanged nods and short greetings, nothing more. Daniel noticed how she always seemed attentive to her surroundings, like someone who had learned early how to take responsibility. One afternoon, Daniel's car refused to start. He stood in his driveway, frustrated, checking the engine even though he barely understood it. He was wiping sweat from his forehead when Alina's voice came from behind him. "Car trouble?" He turned. She stood a few feet away, holding a small bag of groceries. "Yeah," he said with a tired laugh. "It worked fine yesterday." She walked closer, careful not to invade his space. "My uncle used to fix cars. I learned a little." Before Daniel could reply, she placed her groceries down and looked under the hood. She did not rush. She listened to the engine when Daniel tried again. After a few minutes, she pointed to a loose wire. "Try now," she said. The engine started. Daniel blinked, surprised. "That's wow, thank you," she shrugged lightly. "It happens a lot in the heat." He felt something shift inside him. Gratitude, yes, but also a strange sense of being seen, even in a small way. They talked for a few minutes more. Simple things, where Daniel came from, why Alina returned. She explained she had lived in the city for a while but came back to help her grandmother and take care of family matters. She did not go into detail, and Daniel did not push. What struck him most was how direct she was. She did not speak too much, but every word felt chosen with care. There was no need to impress, no hidden agenda, just honesty. As days turned into a week, Daniel realized their brief conversations had become something he looked forward to. He did not admit it to himself, but he found comfort in the predictability of seeing her next door. It made the place feel less temporary. One evening, the town experienced a short power outage. Daniel sat on his porch, watching the sky turn deep orange and purple as the sun disappeared. The air cooled slightly, carrying the smell of dust and distant cooking fires. He heard footsteps and saw Alina walking toward her porch with a lantern. "You don't get used to that," Daniel said lightly. She smiled. "You do, eventually." She hesitated, then gestured toward his porch. "Mind if I sit for a minute? My grandmother fell asleep." "Of course," Daniel replied, surprised but pleased. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night. The stars were clearer than Daniel had ever seen them. The quiet did not feel awkward. It felt shared. "Alina," Daniel said after a moment, "if you don't mind me asking, do you plan to stay here?" She looked at the sky before answering. "Yes, this is home. Even when I leave, it pulls me back." Daniel nodded, understanding more than he could explain. He had spent years running from places, thinking distance would fix everything. That night, after Alina went back inside, Daniel stayed on the porch longer than usual. He felt unsettled, but not in a bad way. More like something was beginning quietly, without asking permission. He did not know then that this calm beginning would lead to a moment that would shake him to his core. He did not know that the quiet woman next door would soon ask him a question that would force him to rethink everything he believed about timing, choice, and fate. For now, all he knew was this. For the first time in a long while, Daniel did not feel invisible. And in that small desert town, next to a neighbor he barely knew, something real had begun to take shape. The next morning, Daniel woke earlier than usual. He did not know why. The quiet of the town felt different, like something was waiting just beyond the normal rhythm of his days. He made coffee, sat by the window, and watched sunlight touch the dry land outside. His mind kept returning to the evening before, the stars, the silence, Alina's calm presence. He told himself it meant nothing. Neighbors talked. That was all. Still, he found himself checking the time more often that day. By late afternoon, Daniel decided to take a walk. He followed the dirt road that curved past a few houses and opened into a wide stretch of land. The air was warm but gentle. As he walked back toward home, he noticed Alina in her yard, carefully trimming a small plant near the fence. Her grandmother sat nearby, watching with quiet attention. Daniel hesitated, then lifted his hand. "Evening." Alina looked up and smiled. "Good evening." Her grandmother studied Daniel with sharp, curious eyes. After a moment, she nodded once, as if approving something only she understood. Daniel felt slightly nervous but returned the nod out of respect. Alina stood and wiped her hands. "Did you need something?" "No," Daniel said quickly. "Just saying hello." There was a pause. Then Alina looked toward her grandmother. "I'll be back soon," she said gently. The older woman smiled faintly. "Take your time." Alina walked toward the fence, stopping a few steps away from Daniel. "Would you like to walk for a bit?" she asked. Daniel blinked, surprised. "Sure." Yeah, they walked slowly along the road, neither in a hurry. For a while they talked about small things, the weather, the town, how different life felt here compared to bigger cities. Alina spoke about growing up between two worlds, learning traditions at home and adapting to life outside. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He liked hearing her voice, steady and thoughtful. As they walked, Alina grew quieter. Daniel noticed it but did not interrupt. Finally, she stopped near a large tree that cast a wide shadow. "Daniel," she said, turning to face him. "Yes," she took a breath, not a nervous one but a deep, careful one. "I need to ask you something." Daniel's stomach tightened slightly. "Okay," she looked at him directly. There was no smile now, only seriousness. "Will you be my husband?" For a moment the world seemed to pause. Daniel stared at her, sure he had misunderstood. The words felt too heavy, too sudden to belong in a simple walk. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His heart began to beat faster. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "What?" Alina did not look embarrassed. She did not laugh it off. "I asked if you would be my husband." Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. He looked around, half expecting someone else to appear to explain this with some strange joke, but the road was empty. The land was quiet. Alina stood there waiting. We've only met twice," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "I don't understand." "I know," Alina replied. "And I don't expect you to answer right now." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. His thoughts were tangled. "Did I do something to make you think?" "No," she said gently. "This isn't about that." They stood in silence again. Daniel felt overwhelmed, but he also sensed this was not a careless moment for her. There was intention behind every word she spoke. "Can you explain?" he asked. Alina nodded. "Yes, but not here." She turned back toward the houses. Daniel followed, still in shock. They stopped near his porch where they could sit without being overheard. Alina remained standing for a moment as if gathering her thoughts. "My grandmother is very sick," she began. "She doesn't show it, but I know. She raised me. She wants to see certain things settled before she leaves this world." Daniel listened, his confusion slowly giving way to concern. "She believes family stability matters," Alina continued. "Not just emotionally, but legally and culturally. She worries about our land, our home, our future, and she worries about me being alone." Daniel swallowed. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying she wants me married," Alina said honestly. "But I won't choose someone just to please her. I would rather stay alone than live a lie." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then why ask me?" Alina met his eyes. "Because you are not from here, yet you respect this place. Because you are kind without asking for anything. Because when you speak, you listen more than you talk." Daniel felt something twist inside his chest. He had not realized anyone noticed those things about him. "But still," he said, "this is a lot." "I know," Alina replied, "and I'm not asking for a rushed decision. I'm asking if you would consider it." Daniel leaned back against the porch railing. His mind raced through memories of his past, the failed relationship, the fear of commitment, the belief that he was not someone people chose first. "I don't think I'm the right person," he said quietly. Alina did not look disappointed. "You don't have to decide now." She picked up her bag, preparing to leave. "I wanted to be honest, that's all." As she walked away, Daniel called her name. "Alina," she turned. "Why me?" he asked again, softer this time. She thought for a moment. "Because sometimes the right person is not the obvious one." She went back to her house, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. That night Daniel barely slept. His mind replayed the moment over and over. The calm way she asked, the seriousness in her eyes. There had been no pressure, no demand, just truth. He tried to convince himself it was none of his business. He had come to this town to escape complications, not step into someone else's life so deeply. Yet he could not ignore the strange pull he felt. The next day passed slowly. Daniel worked, but his focus was gone. Every sound outside made him glance toward the window. In the evening he saw Alina sitting with her grandmother again. This time the older woman waved at him. Daniel hesitated, then walked over. "Good evening," he said. "Sit," the grandmother said kindly, patting the chair beside her. Daniel sat, unsure what to expect. Alina stood nearby, watching closely. "My granddaughter is brave," the older woman said. "She speaks her mind." Daniel nodded. "She does." "She does not ask for things lightly," the grandmother continued. "If she asked you something important, it means she trusts you." Daniel felt the weight of those words. "I don't expect an answer today," the grandmother added. "Only honesty." Daniel looked at Alina. "I need time," he said. She nodded. "That's fair." As he returned to his house that night, Daniel realized something had shifted. The town no longer felt like a temporary stop. It felt like a crossroads. He still did not know what his answer would be. But he knew one thing for certain. The question Alina asked had already changed him. And whatever came next, there was no going back to the quiet life he had planned. The days after that conversation moved slowly, but Daniel felt as if something inside him was rushing forward without permission. He tried to return to his normal routine, yet nothing felt normal anymore. Every task seemed heavier, every quiet moment louder. The question Alina had asked did not fade with time. Instead, it settled into his thoughts, waiting for attention. He avoided her for 2 days, not out of anger but confusion. Each time he stepped outside, he worried he would see her and not know what to say. At the same time, part of him hoped he would. It was a strange feeling, wanting and fearing the same thing. On the 3rd evening, Daniel noticed the light was on in Alina's kitchen long after sunset. Her grandmother's silhouette moved slowly past the window. Without fully thinking it through, Daniel grabbed a small bag of fruit he had bought earlier and walked next door. He told himself it was just a neighborly gesture. Alina opened the door before he could knock. She looked surprised, then relieved. "Hi," Daniel said awkwardly. "I thought I'd check in." She stepped aside to let him in. "Thank you." The house smelled of warm bread and herbs. It felt lived in, full of memories that did not belong to Daniel but welcomed him anyway. Her grandmother sat at the table, sorting something carefully with slow hands. "You came back," the older woman said, smiling. "Yes," Daniel replied. "I hope that's okay." "It is," she said. "Sit." Daniel sat down, placing the fruit on the table. Alina poured tea for all of them. No one rushed the moment. Silence filled the room, but it was not uncomfortable. After a while, the grandmother spoke again. "You are thinking too much," she said gently. Daniel gave a small, unsure smile. "That sounds about right." She nodded. "Big questions need big thoughts. But they also need listening." With that, she stood up and left the room, giving Alina and Daniel privacy without making a show of it. Alina sat across from him, her hands folded. "I didn't mean to place a burden on you," she said softly. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's part of why it's so hard." They talked then, really talked for the first time. Alina spoke about her childhood, about learning responsibility early, about leaving home to find independence, and then returning when family needed her. She spoke of love not as a dramatic feeling, but as something built slowly through care and trust. Daniel shared his own past, things he rarely said out loud. The job that ended suddenly. The relationship where he had tried his best but still failed. The fear that he was always one step behind everyone else. Alina listened without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "You don't sound broken to me." That simple sentence stayed with him. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. Not as a couple, not as anything clearly defined. Just two people learning the shape of each other's lives. They cooked meals, walked the land, talked late into the night. Daniel helped around the house when he could. He drove Alina's grandmother to appointments. Slowly, trust grew without effort. Daniel began to see the town differently too. It no longer felt like a place he was hiding in. It felt like a place that was teaching him patience. The people greeted him by name now. He felt connected in small, meaningful ways. Still, the question remained unanswered. One afternoon, Daniel joined Alina at a community gathering. He watched her move through the crowd, greeting people with quiet respect. He realized how deeply she belonged here. And he realized how far he still felt from belonging anywhere. Later that evening, they sat near the fire pit outside her house. The air was cool, the sky wide and clear. "I'm afraid," Daniel admitted. Alina nodded. "So am I," he looked at her. "Then why do you seem so calm?" "Because fear doesn't mean stop," she said. "Sometimes it means pay attention." Daniel thought about that long after the fire burned low. That night, he dreamed of standing at a crossroads, unable to see where either path led. When he woke, his chest felt tight, but his mind was clear in a way it had not been before. He realized something important. The question was not really about marriage. It was about choice. About whether he would keep running from uncertainty or finally stand still long enough to build something real. The next morning, Daniel walked next door with steady steps. Alina opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded and led him outside where the sun was just beginning to rise. "I don't have a full answer yet," Daniel said, "but I know I don't want to walk away." Alina looked at him carefully. "That's enough for now." They stood together, watching the light spread across the land. The future was still unclear, but for the first time, Daniel felt ready to face it, whatever shape it took. And deep inside, he knew this was no longer just her question. It was his too. Daniel's decision to stay present changed the rhythm of his days. He no longer woke up feeling like a visitor passing through. Instead, each morning felt like a small promise he had made to himself, to face things honestly, even when they were uncomfortable. He still did his work, still walked the same roads, but everything felt sharper, more meaningful. Alina noticed the change before he did. He asked more questions now. Not curious questions meant to fill silence, but thoughtful ones that showed he was trying to understand her world. He asked about her grandmother's stories, about the meaning behind certain traditions, about what she hoped for beyond duty and responsibility. She answered carefully, never rushing. Sometimes she admitted she did not have clear answers either. As weeks passed, Daniel became more involved in daily life next door. He helped repair a fence damaged by wind. He learned how to prepare simple meals that Alina's grandmother enjoyed. In return, Alina taught him patience, how to slow down, how to listen without trying to fix everything. Still, the weight of the unspoken decision remained between them. One afternoon, Alina's grandmother asked Daniel to walk with her. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane, but her eyes were sharp. "You are kind," she said as they walked, "but kindness alone does not carry a long road." Daniel nodded. "I know." "Do you know what you are afraid of?" she asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "Failing," he said honestly. "Hurting people I care about." The older woman smiled. "That fear means you care, but care must become action or it turns into regret." Those words stayed with Daniel. That evening he found Alina sitting alone near the porch, looking tired. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a small smile. "Some days are heavier than others." They sat together quietly. Daniel realized how much strength Alina carried without showing it. He also realized how easy it would be to walk away, to say he was not ready, that this was too much. But easy did not mean right. "I don't want to make a promise I can't keep," Daniel said slowly. Alina nodded. "Neither do I. But I also don't want fear to make the decision for me," he added. She turned to look at him then, really look at him. "That matters." Over the next few days, Daniel faced moments that tested his resolve. A call from his old city reminded him of the life he could return to. Familiar streets, familiar habits, no expectations beyond himself. He almost packed his bags that night. Instead, he went for a long walk. He thought about how empty that old life had felt, even when it looked successful from the outside. He thought about the quiet dinners, the shared work, the steady presence of someone who trusted him without pressure. He realized that safety without meaning was still a kind of loneliness. The turning point came when Alina's grandmother fell ill one night. Daniel was there when it happened. He helped calmly, drove them to the clinic, waited without complaint. In that moment, he did not feel trapped or forced. He felt needed and capable. As they sat in the waiting room, Alina leaned her head against his shoulder. It was not dramatic, it was simple, but it told him everything. Later, when her grandmother was resting, Alina looked at Daniel with tired eyes. "Thank you," she said, "for staying." Daniel squeezed her hand gently. "I wanted to." That was when he understood something important. Commitment was not a single moment or word. It was a series of choices made again and again, even when no one was watching. A few days later, Daniel asked Alina to walk with him to the same tree where she had asked him that shocking question weeks before. The air was calm, the land quiet. "I'm still scared," Daniel admitted, "but I've learned something." Alina waited. "I don't need to know everything about the future," he continued. "I just need to know who I'm willing to face it with." Alina's breath caught slightly, but she said nothing. "I can't promise perfection," Daniel said, "but I can promise effort, honesty, and respect." He paused, then added, "If that's enough, then I want to choose you." Alina's eyes filled, but she stayed composed. She reached for his hands. "That is more than enough," she said. They did not rush after that. They talked openly about boundaries, about time, about building something slowly and responsibly. The decision did not erase challenges, but it gave those challenges direction. When Daniel returned to his house that night, he felt lighter than he had in years. Not because everything was solved, but because he had finally stopped running. The quiet town remained quiet. The desert remained wide and patient. But Daniel was no longer standing at a crossroads. He had chosen a path, and for the first time he was walking it with intention. The days that followed Daniel's choice were calm, but full in a way he had never experienced before. Nothing dramatic changed overnight. There were no sudden celebrations, no big announcements. Life continued in its steady rhythm, but the meaning beneath it felt deeper. Daniel and Alina agreed to move slowly. They understood that trust grows best when it is not rushed. Each morning, Daniel still woke in his small house, but now he crossed the short distance next door more often. Sometimes it was to help with chores. Sometimes it was simply to sit and talk. Even silence felt different now. It no longer felt empty. Alina's grandmother watched them closely but without pressure. One evening, as Daniel helped prepare dinner, she spoke quietly. "You chose with your eyes open," she said. "That is all I hoped for." Daniel nodded. "I'm still learning," she smiled. "Learning never ends." As her health slowly weakened, Daniel noticed how Alina balanced strength and care. She did not complain. She did not pretend everything was easy. She simply showed up every day. Daniel found himself doing the same. He did not feel like an outsider anymore. He felt like part of something that mattered. The town noticed too. People greeted Daniel warmly now, not just politely. They invited him to gatherings, asked for his help, shared stories. He realized belonging was not something given all at once. It was built through consistency. One afternoon, Daniel received another call from his old city. This time, he listened without tension. When the call ended, he felt no pull to return. The choice had already been made. That evening, Daniel and Alina sat outside, watching the sky darken. "Do you regret asking me?" Daniel asked softly. Alina thought for a moment. "No," she said. "Even if you had said no, I would still be glad I was honest." Daniel smiled. "I'm glad too." When the time came, they spoke with the grandmother together. Daniel expressed his intentions clearly, respectfully. There were no demands, no expectations beyond shared effort and care. The older woman listened, then reached for Daniel's hand. "Then I am at peace," she said. Weeks later, when she passed quietly in her sleep, the loss was deep but gentle. Grief filled the house, but so did gratitude. Daniel stayed close, not because he felt obligated, but because he wanted to. Alina leaned on him, and he did not pull away. In the months that followed, Daniel and Alina began planning their future in small steps. Paperwork, responsibilities, conversations about work, home, and balance. There were disagreements, moments of doubt, and days when exhaustion took over, but there was always honesty. Daniel learned that love was not a feeling that stayed perfect. It was a choice made daily, sometimes quietly, sometimes with effort. One evening, as they sat together after a long day, Alina looked at Daniel and said, "You know, that question I asked you, it scared me too." Daniel laughed softly. "It terrified me," she smiled, "but it brought us here." Daniel looked around the land, the house, the life taking shape. "Yes," he said, "it did." Years later, Daniel would think back to that second meeting and smile at how unprepared he had been. How one unexpected question had changed everything. He had come to the town looking for escape and found purpose instead. And when people asked how it all began, Daniel would answer honestly. "It started with a question," he would say. "One that forced me to stop running and start living."